LBC, I'm Paul Smith.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Collins.
And good evening. Coming up a little later.
Minimum unit pricing will save 60 lives in the first year alone. We will see hospital admissions reduced by around 1,500 in the first year.
Do they really know that? Is just having a minimum price for alcohol the best way to stop people overindulging? We'll look at that a little later. We couldn't resist this.
Freshly cooked Greggs sausage rolls. It doesn't get much better than that.
What? No, and you don't get into much more hot water than you have today down there at Greggs HQ by portraying Jesus as a sausage roll in a Christmas commercial. I'm not making this up. We'll look at that one too, but we begin here.
The President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Comrade R.G. Mugabe, and his family are safe and sound, and their security is guaranteed.
We are, of course, broadcasting the first part of this show on Facebook. We are live in moving pictures. Facebook.com/LBC is where you will find us. 0345 6060973. If you're not yet following us on Twitter, you absolutely should. What on earth's going on there? You absolutely should be. At LBC or at Ian Collins UK. Question: will Zimbabwe now go from bad to worse? Robert Mugabe, and I'm probably speak for everybody listening to this, is one of those figures that appears to have simply been running that place for all of our entire lives. About 1980, of course, when officially he became first Prime Minister, latterly President. But this man has been a presence on the international scene forever in a variety of ways, and of course for a whole host of reasons, whether it was the culling of white-owned farms, whether it was robust and some may even say lethal disagreements with his opposition politicians, whether it was the millions of % inflation rate back in as recently as 2008, I believe. And today he's gone. Robert Mugabe is no longer the head of Zimbabwe. But it's not a coup, apparently. It is not a coup. The West has not demanded this man go. His political opponents haven't demanded this man go. His people, economically starved and with little hope, haven't demanded that this man goes. But the army, citing, we understand, criminal activity by those around him, have stepped in. They were at pains to point out this is not a coup. 0345 6060 973. I'd love to speak with you if you are from Zimbabwe, if this is an area, a terrain you know rather well. What happens next for Zimbabwe? It seems, as an outsider, and of course, depending on how you wish to define Robert Mugabe's politics, a sort of brand of socialism, I think, would be reasonable. He's had supporters. There are people who have, throughout, supported Robert Mugabe from a Western perspective. We look at what appears to be a rotten regime that has essentially brutalised its people through economic measures and the lack of growth in inflation rates, unemployment rates, people working and not even getting paid for what they're doing. Some suggesting unemployment rate is 95%. Depends on who you listen to. Some say it's as low as 4%. 0345 6060 973. This is a huge story. It's huge not just for Zimbabwe, it's huge for Africa, and therefore it will be huge for the rest of the world. 0345 6060 973. Let's get some information on this from a reporter at ENCA, South African News Organisation. Kialili Kumalo is joining me now. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you, sir. Lovely to have you.
And nice to have you with us. I was outlining there, as you will have heard, just loosely the events surrounding Robert Mugabe and encapsulating some of what the perception of Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe has been. Were you surprised by what has happened in the last 24 hours?
Well, I think from the outset, I was not really taken aback by the events in Zimbabwe. For some time, there has been some threats that some political change may happen in Zimbabwe. So from the time when President Mugabe decided to fire his Vice President, Emmerson Mnangagwa, which a lot of people are saying that was actually a main trigger for the political change that we're witnessing in Zimbabwe. So, and of course that the First Lady of Zimbabwe, Grace Mugabe, has always been, very much, vocal in terms of really just presenting herself as a formidable candidate to actually succeed President Mugabe. And of course, Mr. Emmerson Mnangagwa, this is a veteran of the ZANU-PF. He was part of the guerrilla war in the 70s with the British rule, eventually with the independence. The very first post he had, he was a state security minister, essentially responsible for the intelligence of Zimbabwe. So this has been something that has been bubbling for some time, and eventually it had to happen.
And I understand that the Vice President, Mnangagwa, is also very friendly with Major General Moyo, who, of course, is the man we've seen on our TV screens talking about what has happened. Is that a coincidence that they're just friends and go back many decades?
Well, they are friends, and it certainly does go to many decades. But, of course, what is very important to point out is that the military has made it abundantly clear that they are targeting the people that they call criminals, those who are corrupt in Zimbabwe. So, and for some time, there have been at pains saying this is not a coup. It's a bloodless correction, so to speak. So whatever you want to interpret that, it depends on one's interpretation. But it does bear all the hallmarks of a coup, given the seizure of the key installations in Zimbabwe. But it's quite interesting, and lots of Zimbabweans that we have been speaking to, they are saying this is quite a turning point for them, and they are so excited. It's a change they've been yearning for some time, and of course, Zimbabweans are known to be very resilient, and they were just waiting for that particular moment, and of course, the military rose to the occasion, as it were.
Many are suggesting the reason the word coup isn't being used is because there is a fear that Zimbabwe could go the same way as Egypt in being kicked out of the African Union if it's believed that a coup had taken place. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that's a very correct interpretation. We know that the coups, especially with the African Union and, for example, the Southern African Development Community, which is the regional bloc, they all have a number of protocols which are very quite explicit. They are saying if there's any unconstitutional change of government, that country will be kicked out. And obviously, and of course, a coup does have bad connotations and in terms of the stability in the country. So I think the military is trying to be very strategic in terms of how it's, sending that. But of course, there has been reaction from the neighboring South Africa. Here in South Africa, President Jacob Zuma issuing out quite a number of statements, and we have been interacting with some of the officials within the presidency, saying it's been quite a tumultuous day for them, trying to really dance the diplomatic fires in the neighboring country. President Zuma essentially calling for calm and restraint. And we know that if anything happens in Zimbabwe, in all likelihood South Africa all the time and some neighboring countries tend to bear the brunt. Quite a massive volumes of Zimbabweans may be heading this side if there's any sort of instability.
You said at the beginning about the firing of Vice President Mnangagwa, which happened just, of course, a week ago. Why were the military so keen this week to identify what they felt was a criminal element within Mugabe's system? They could have done that at any point in the last 5-10 years.
I think that's a very interesting question as to why now. Why this particular time? But the military also has been repeatedly saying, look, they were not in a position to see the revolution hijacked by those who are hell-bent in occupying the position and causing social and economic suffering in Zimbabwe. But then again, the question is, why this particular phase? We saw, for example, some couple of years ago, this is not the first time whereby the First Lady, would have an issue with certain individuals, and then we'll see President Mugabe acting. If you look in the history of Zimbabwe, for example, the former Vice President of Zimbabwe, Joyce Mujuru, she suffered the same fate, and she was also a freedom fighter, but there was no activity from the side of the military. There was no statement issued. But of course, when it comes to Emmerson Mnangagwa, this is somebody who is very instrumental within the military, within the circles of this very key institution. But then a lot of critics also, they're saying, why is the military acting? If you look back as far back as in 1980, during, of course, the very first time, and with the killings in Matabeleland, the military was quite instrumental in those killings. But then they just, never, sort of tried to start to bring themselves to book, so to speak. So it's a series of questions in terms of the dynamics at play.
Who is likely to become the next president? Will Mnangagwa return? Is that possible?
At this point in time, there are some unconfirmed reports that he has flown back to Zimbabwe. So after he was dismissed from his position, he went to exile for some time here in South Africa. But now there are some reports that he has flown back to the military base, and he's trying to take over the government and to clean the system, as it were. But of course, at this point in time, it all remains a speculation. But it all points out to him. This is a most powerful person, and for some time he has always been known to be an heir apparent should anything happen to President Mugabe. So, and of course, this is quite a turning point for Africa. For some time, President Mugabe, he has always been seen as a grand man of African politics, as it were, in the very same, stature, for example, as your Muammar Gaddafi, somebody who is respected in Africa, but also in some certain quarters who is, despised as somebody who destroyed an economy of the country that was very much thriving. And of course, given the very policies with the land grabs in the early 2000s.
Just finally, if you could, in a sentence, how do you think the average Zimbabwean will react to Robert Mugabe going?
It's quite hard to really gauge that. A lot of Zimbabweans, of course, they're very much angry about some of the policies that he has implemented. But on the other hand, you have some Zimbabweans, especially in the rural areas, who are still seeing him as a hero, who are still seeing him as this man who dared the Western nations, who stood up for Africa, as it were. So there's no telling really as to what will be the reaction. But, obviously in some certain quarters, there's a sense of jubilation.
We thank you for your time, sir. Kialili Kumalo, who is a journalist based in South Africa, reporting from the Zimbabwean embassy in Pretoria throughout the course of the day and joining us there here on LBC. Thank you to you, outlining the events as they are so far. This is a huge, not just a huge African story, but a global story as well. What does this say for the region? What does it say for Africa, the West's relationship with that part of the world? I'd love to speak with you if this is your country. We'll chat to Bertram in just a second, who is Zimbabwean. Your thoughts on this? What happens next for this country? Some would describe as a once great country, and I think many people will struggle to give it that title after the events of the last, I was going to say few years, but it clearly goes back to more than just a few years. If you look at hyperinflation, unemployment rates, and all sorts of other controversy that has surrounded the socialist system that Robert Mugabe has put into place, more concerned about equaling the pie rather than growing the economy, to paraphrase a line he once delivered to his people. 0345 6060 973. It's Late Nights with Ian Collins, LBC.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
So, where is the school where this term's mother and father will be barred? It's in London. It's in Wandsworth. Education chiefs accused of politically correct fascism yesterday after a school was forced to remove the words mother and father from its child admission policy. Chris McGovern is chairman of the Campaign for Real Education.
The words mother and father are foundation stones of our society.
Benjamin Butterworth is a reporter with Pink News.
You know, what this form is saying is not fascism. It is simply accurate form keeping to say that you should have parent 1 and 2 because not everyone will have a mother and a father.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Hampton by Hilton. Book direct for the lowest price.
Every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
Aled Jones returns with the final chapter in a groundbreaking series of albums. One voice, Believe. Performing with himself as a boy and, for the first time, alongside his son. Aled Jones, One Voice, Believe. Out now at selected Sainsbury's stores.
High quality, affordable kitchens designed in your own home. That's Room Sense.
That's Room Sense.
Book your free Room Sense home design visit and we'll measure up, show you samples, create a stunning kitchen design and give you a quote all before we leave.
Quality at a price you can afford. That's Room Sense.
Book today at roomsense.co.uk.
Ready for Black Friday? At Argos, our Black Friday event is now on, with 14 days of deals and amazing prices. Plus, with our Buy Now Price Promise, our Black Friday event offers won't go lower on Black Friday at Argos or we'll refund the difference. Go Argos. Ends 28th of November. Terms and conditions apply. See online for details.
Alan receives an unexpected call, which is the worst type of call. A tenant is moving out today. Frantically, Alan checks the diary. He's not in there, which means no checkout, which means no new tenant. Why is property so hard to manage, he groans. Poor Alan needs the calming influence of Arthur, the life-changing property management platform that puts you at the centre and in control. Arthur Online. Start your free 30-day trial at arthuronline.co.uk.
Antibiotics, we're wonderful pills, but don't ever think we'll cure all of your ills. So every time you feel a bit under the weather, don't always think that we can make you better. Take us for the wrong thing, that's dangerous to do. When you really need us, we could stop working for you. So please don't end up paying the price. Always take your doctor's advice.
Taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk. Take your doctor or nurse's advice and keep antibiotics working.
Around 14 million British households are overpaying for their energy, and we at Flipper want to change this. Sign up in less than 60 seconds and start saving serious money on your energy bills with Flipper. In fact, if you are one of the 14 million households still on a dual-fuel standard variable rate with a Big Six supplier, we guarantee to save you at least £200 in your first year, or we'll give you your Flipper membership for free. Search for Flipper today and never overpay for energy again.
Late Nights with Ian Collins on LBC.
On the phones with you, reacting to the big news around the globe today. Robert Mugabe has gone. This is not a coup. The military are at pains to point out it is not a coup. As I put to our guest, there could be a variety of reasons. It looks like a coup, it sounds like a coup, it's played out like a coup, but apparently it's not a coup. Egypt, of course, a military coup, the coup that took place, rather, in Egypt had, without doubt, the title of coup, and as a result, Egypt found themselves out of the bloc that is the African Union. I think Zimbabwe wanted to, at all costs, clearly avoid that move, which is why the head, certainly The voice of the Zimbabwean army, Major General Moyo. Here's the man you might have seen on your TV pictures doing I was about to say the rounds of the TV studios, the TV studio in Zimbabwe, explaining that Mr. Mugabe is safe and that this is not a coup. Their raison d'etre here was that they were attempting simply to arrest and detain criminal elements that surrounded Robert Mugabe. Make of that whatever you will. But what happens next for this once great country? Bertram is in Milton Keynes. Good evening to you, sir.
Hello, Ian.
Hi, nice to have you with us. You are a Zimbabwean. What are your thoughts of the news of the last 24 hours?
Yes, I am. I must say that I'm pretty pleased with what has occurred, and to all of us who understand the Zimbabwean situation, it was possibly the only means of actually getting the tyrant out of the seat of power, and that was by the military actually issuing him with the command to actually stand down.
Yeah.
Reason why I think this is not a coup is that we have to understand that the military is part and parcel of the ZANU-PF pillars of that support the ZANU-PF party.
Right, so they are essentially on the same side.
Exactly. So you have the executive, you have the members, and then you have the armed wing of ZANU-PF party, which is the military, okay? So that's why I say that this is an internal ZANU-PF squabble that has been conflated to a national crisis.
I said at the beginning, Bertram, that when we think of Robert Mugabe, and this man has never been out of the headlines in all of our lifetimes, and if somebody had said to us last week, how will Mugabe leave office, other than dying, the man's clearly very old, we would have sort of wondered whether there would have been some kind of Western pressure on South Africa that would have, perhaps through Zuma, would have accelerated this. We might have thought about his political opponents. We might, of course, have thought about the people uprising. I don't think many of us would have considered that the army would have gone in and arrested those around him and therefore put Mugabe into safekeeping within a house out of reach of power.
Well, Ian, you see, that's where the rub is. The military are not innocent bystanders in the economic stakeholding interests within Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. They are very much active players, and because their interests, economic interests, are now being threatened by the Grace Mugabe takeover of the vice presidency, they had to do something. And Mnangagwa represents their best bet to actually ensure that the economic interests will be protected by the highest level within government.
Well, what do you think is likely to happen now? Because the ruling party will clearly remain in power. There will be opposition politicians who will perhaps be calling for fresh elections, Vangarai being the obvious person that comes to mind after his dalliance with high office some years ago. Is that likely to happen, or are we likely to just see somebody put in who essentially just replicates what was there before?
Right. Mnangagwa is clearly first choice.
Sure.
Hence the military command informing Mugabe that his time is actually up. So there will be transfer of power from the boardroom, from Mugabe to Mnangagwa. Hopefully, being a reformist, Mnangagwa will then form a coalition within the country with the opposition parties, and which the biggest one of which is MDC. Mm-hmm. Civilian authority has got to be restored as soon as possible.
Sure.
And possibly he could look at also bringing in Joyce Mujuru, who was unceremoniously evicted on trumped-up charges by Mugabe again. That will then solidify the unity within the country at the political level, and I think that will gain the support of the majority of the population.
Most people, of course, just want to see Zimbabwe grow and thrive. That's really what the average Zimbabwean is looking for, surely.
Right. Now, the model of corrupt governance under the Mugabe ZANU-PF party regime has got to be discarded, first of all, because that model of corrupt governance is which has been allowed to flourish and grow and condemn the country to perpetual endemic poverty, cannot continue. You know, it's not sustainable. So Mnangagwa, I think, being a reformist, will actually change that model, and hopefully we will get honest government at long last, because that is what we deserve, and what will arise out of the proper governance will be flourishing Zimbabwe again.
I think your last point there about Mnangagwa is probably where the smart money seems to be right now. Bertram, thank you, sir. You outlined very well your own experience and, of course, where you believe this non-coup is going. Tandy is in Caterham. You have family in this region, not in Zimbabwe, but next door in Zambia, I understand.
Yes, and I'm very impressed by how the army have staged the takeover, because Mugabe is still very much respected because his role in the struggle for independence. So, yes, people do despise him, but they had to do it in a way which sort of gave him a sort of dignified exit. In terms of moving forward, I think the problem is that those types of economic policies are still quite popular, that brand of socialism, but it can't get any worse than...
How is that popular, do you think, in that neck of the woods? Bearing in mind where, I mean, they had this extraordinary figure, you may remember, back in 2008, when inflation was something like 23 million %.
It's really difficult to explain. I think a slight sort of grievance if we blame the West, or, you know, maybe if we share everything. Unfortunately, in the developing world, that brand of economics tends to be popular.
Sharing nothing, though, is difficult.
Yeah, but I think for some reason people still cope with it and say that it's because of the West. But I think when Mugabe actually dies, then that's when actual, you know, change will actually start to actually happen. But it can't get any worse than it is now.
So you don't believe the army's line, which is we were there really just to remove criminal elements that were surrounding Mr. Mugabe. You don't believe that really for 1 second. You think that's a cover for literally just getting rid of him?
Yes, and it's been done brilliantly, very, very well.
It is, in fact, if that is the game, it's been done incredibly well, with no blood being lost, and at the moment a rather what could rather be a smooth transition of power. If Mnangagwa does turn out, the former vice president only lost his job last week, turns out to come back into office, but of course as the president, as distinct from the vice president. Tandy, thank you for that. More of your calls on the way on this one. 0345 606 0973. Mugabe under house arrest by the Zimbabwean military. They say he is safe, but who will replace him? And will we see another version of the same failed ideology? I think what most Zimbabweans would clearly want would be change, and how you go about that change and how that is achieved will largely depend, of course, on the person that becomes the next president. The former vice president, who was fired last week in this battle with Mugabe wanting his wife to take over, and various other elements of infighting, is the likely person, most people seem to be saying, to return to high office, but this time in the main role as president. More of your comments coming in on this. What happens next for Zimbabwe? 0345 6060 973. Also to come this evening.
Freshly cooked Greggs sausage rolls. It doesn't get much better than that.
Well, Greggs, the purveyors of a fine pasty and a baked sausage roll, are in deep trouble. They've been forced to apologise after using a sausage roll instead of baby Jesus in a nativity scene to advertise its advent calendar. I mean, that's not an exaggeration of what they did. They literally took a nativity scene. There's the manger, there's the wise men, but where's baby Jesus? There's no baby Jesus, there's just a flipping sausage roll instead. Why is that acceptable, by the way, to mock Christianity? They would never have done that with any other religion. On the wider point, in fact, aren't you sensing, bearing in mind what's gone on at Tesco as well, that Christianity is getting a bit of an unfair deal generally this festive season? We'll look at that in just a bit as well. Right now, 10:30, the latest news headlines come from Paul Smith.
The man who's dominated Zimbabwe since independence in 1980 is powerless and under house arrest. It appears Robert Mugabe has been brought down by his former bodyguard and Deputy Emerson Mnangagwa. A hairdresser has been convicted of deliberately trying to infect 10 men with HIV after meeting them on a gay dating app. 27-year-old Darryl Rowe demanded unprotected sex, but if someone said no, he secretly damaged contraceptives. And Greggs Bakers has apologised for swapping Jesus for a sausage roll in a promotional image for its advent calendar. It shows a nativity scene with 3 wise men gathered round a pastry instead of the Christ. LBC weather, mostly cloudy with patchy mist and fog forming in the south. Clear spells in the north. A band of rain will slowly slide southeastwards into central parts by dawn. An overnight low of 1 degree.
This is LBC.
Come to Galliard Homes for brand new London apartments from under £300,000. Westgate House is superbly located, just a 6-minute walk to the Tube, that has you into the West End in 21 minutes, which is roughly the same time it will take you to drive to Heathrow. There are exclusive on-site facilities rarely available to buy in a London development at these prices, such as 24-hour concierge, co-working space, a private screening room and health club. To live the London lifestyle from just £300,000, come to Westgate House, Westgate, Ealing, London W5. Call 0203 770 6300 or visit galliardhomes.com. That's galliardhomes.com. Galliard, getting Londoners on the ladder.
Are electric cars okay for long journeys? Are there any tax benefits to having them on my fleet?
Are they easy to drive?
Can they go off-road?
Do they keep their value?